Condemned: Criminal Origins was released in 2005 as a launch title for the Xbox 360, created by Monolith Productions. Look, every time I hear someone say Monolith, it's either the one that made Fear or the one that made Xenoblade. You get? I've always liked Monolith's games. I haven't played their entire catalog, but I did really like Fear, and Fear 2 to some extent. Not Fear 2's story, though. That's very messy, to say the least. Also, Shadow of Mordor was good. Haven't played it in years, but it was good. Never played Shadow of War, nor Blood 2, nor none of the No One Lives Forever games. I did play Gotham City Imposters. Where am I going with this? Though unlike Monolith's previous works, they had grand plans for Condemned, expanding into a prequel Flash game, 3 additional games being mapped out before the first game was ever released, and a potential movie in the works. Besides the Flash game, which you can't even play anymore officially since the site for it is now defunct, the movie went nowhere, and as for the other 3 games, only one was ever made afterwards. I've always seen this game in action thanks to the many YouTube videos online, and a demo that was released on the 360. I wouldn't get around to finally playing it for myself till, say, 2 years ago when I bought a copy for the Xbox 360. Also, I like the game's description on the Xbox store because all it says is first-person psychological thriller. Like, nothing more, nothing less. I technically could have played it earlier because I've forgotten I already own it on Steam but I wanted a physical copy and also... Well now, let's get into and talk Condemned: Criminal Origins. In the fictional city of Metro, not the most creative of names, the city has seen a major surge in homicides and assaults committed by the city's homeless. Ethan Thomas, an agent of the FBI's serial crime unit, is called on to one of the crime scenes committed by the so-called matchmaker, accompanied by Detective Dickinson and Officer Becker.
Your stupid car broke my light. Better turn yours on. I hear you're afraid of the dark.
Oh, shut up, Dickens. Well, actually, that's one thing Condemned does pretty well. Like, this game is dark. Like, dark. It can be really dark at points. I guess both in tone and just the general atmosphere of it. The lighting in general is really nice. Then again, this is also the same studio that did the similar thing in Fear. I guess they just carried over their techniques from that game to this. Oh wait, they came out the same year. The investigation, however, is cut short when they notice that someone else is in the building with them. Thomas soon runs into the supposed matchmaker, holding him at gunpoint. The other 2 cops bust in and try to save Thomas, but they end up getting shot and killed by the matchmaker using Thomas's gun. Thomas is also tossed out the window, and later wakes up in his own apartment, to be woken by Malcolm Van Horn, who happens to be an old friend of his father's. Malcolm informs Thomas that now he's being wanted by the police for the death of the 2 officers. Now, there originally was going to be a segment where I would ask, why would the cops automatically assume it was Thomas to be the killer, instead of the matchmaker, you know? Then I look back on the footage and I see he's wearing gloves, or looks to be like gloves. I don't know, it's hard to tell with these graphics. So that would have shot my original point in the foot. Meanwhile, Thomas tries to get into contact with the only other available agent within the bureau he can trust, Rosa. Thomas asks for assistance with the investigation, as she's the only one he knows that has the access to the bureau's database and forensics. She's able to help, starting with figuring out where the source of these photos are that happen to be outside Thomas's apartment. Before we can, however, we got some drugged up brutes to beat up, using whatever is lying around the environment, which the game does a really good job with its immersion. You'll quite literally be ripping stuff off the wall to use, or if you're lucky, behind certain objects. Just one junkie, however, is incredibly dangerous if you're not careful or timing your parries correctly. Blocking incoming strikes is key to your survival, and when you get the rhythm down, it becomes an elegant dance, only with a lot more pipes and blood. Maybe a bit more bashing too. Damage them enough and you can pull off a finishing move, assuming you just didn't already smack them in the head. There are 4 finishers: head slamming, neck snapping, face punching, and the good old-fashioned headbutt. They practically function the same way, just with a different animation, but I do highly recommend using the headbutt, especially if you're against a wall, where you can just clip their head into it. This guy, though, is probably having a little too much fun with it. Or, you know, you could just kick them. That also works. There are guns, but they are uncommon, and usually don't hold that much ammo. They are some of the deadliest weapons in the game, no doubt, but you can't just be spraying all over the place, otherwise you'd be wasting perfectly good rounds. Though if you do run out of bullets, you can still smack the fuck out of your foes with the butt of the gun. You may be empty, but you're not out of options. Well, until it breaks anyways. Certain weapons can also be used on the environment to unlock doors and safes, which sometimes the game will require you to do in order to proceed. Fire axes for doors, crowbars for safes, shovels for keypadded gates, and sledgehammers for locks. However, these weapons are usually classified as the heavy weapons.
Or around to get you past barriers. You can even use things like an axe or a sledgehammer as a weapon. They do a great deal of damage, but they're
Yes, Dickinson, I just told them already. You can also see the stats for each weapon in the top right. You can also only hold one weapon on you at a time, so you need to adapt to your environment and be aware of anything you can use. If all else fails though, there's your handy dandy taser. It can stun a target for a few seconds, giving you enough time to give them a good. There's a cooldown for it, however, but there's nothing stopping you from spamming it, I guess. But where's the fun in that, really? Thomas does find his stalker's apartment, and later finds a wall covered in newspapers, which many of them are crossed out, and all of which are being cases that Thomas personally was involved with. Thomas does end up finding clues leading to Bart's apartment store, which has been long abandoned for a good several years. Taking one of the trains, Thomas does make it to the store, where squatters have made it their home, to a point where they're even blending in with the mannequins. There's some sort of evil presence that's spreading throughout the city. Like, we're not just dealing with standard junkies or big grunts, but ones that crawl along the floors and walls like bugs, jumping all over the place, tearing shit from the walls. Something in the city is causing all of them to act this way. Or it could be the cheesy poos they've been eating. Or they're just New Yorkers.
Federal agent, come out peacefully or I will use force.
Fuck you!
They're not dumb, though, as they'll use whatever they can to get the jump on you. And if they got guns to boot, you best kiss your ass goodbye. Like, enemies are incredibly aggressive, but you can use this aggression to your advantage. Sometimes you can just let them take out each other, as they have no semblance of friendly fire. A bonus to that, it can look like a slapstick cartoon, and I do indeed love me some slapstick. One other thing before we get back into the plot are the investigation scenes. Now, the game will auto-equip you with the correct tool for each piece of evidence, so you don't have to worry about managing or remembering which tool does what. However, one important question, though, is where is Thomas keeping all his equipment? I know in his jacket, but like, he's got a UV light, camera, scanner, laser, sampler. Hell, it's a miracle that none of this shit's broken given the many beatdowns he's in. I guess my issue with the crime scenes, however, is I wish there was more in-depth analysis and such during these. It's not a major complaint, and honestly, I feel like the major focus of the game is the combat. I don't know, I kind of wish they would go into more depth with the forensics tools and whatnot to truly feel like a detective, you know? We do end up finding a body, the matchmaker's body. Huh, killed in the same way that he killed his victims too. So, what's going on? And who are we chasing if this is the matchmaker? The killer we've been chasing, now dubbed Serial Killer X, has been using the same killing methods on the killers themselves, hunting them down one by one. All of which again tie back to Thomas in some way. All that can wait as the cops soon enter the scene. Thomas tells Rosa to meet up with him at the city's library, which recently got burned down, and these cops have to be some of the most incompetent cops I've seen in a video game. Like, this one cop here sees a door that's ajar. He hears a cell phone go off or some sort of noise, but he decides to not investigate it. Can you not do your job correctly? Meeting up with Rosa, she brought along a personal file on Thomas showing several anomalies throughout his body, all relating to these visions he's been having of some sort of dark metallic figure that's been following him. I kept ignoring this guy for a good while as, well, we didn't know what he was, or what it is. He showed up several times beforehand, and it's somehow related to the madness that everyone's feeling, and has some sort of interest in Thomas. Rosa also gives Thomas an upgraded taser, and it just wrecks everyone's shit now. After digging through the library's database, all signs point to a teacher that used to work at an abandoned school that is linked to the next killer our guy's after, the torturer. Everything in this city must be abandoned at this point. Like, we have all these buildings, schools, department stores. Like, is there nothing abandoned in this city? Rosa returns to the bureau. Meanwhile, Van Horde, who somehow knew Thomas would be at the library, offers him a ride. He just says it's a pure coincidence that he just saw Thomas here, of all places. Yeah, so something's up with Van Horn now. Thomas does find the teacher and
Help me.
Help is on the way. Who did this to you?
Thomas, how did you not shit yourself? The only piece of evidence he can find lead him to an abandoned orchard on the outskirts of the city, which again Van Horn gives him a ride. They go to the house that's on the property, and after exploring the house, Thomas finds out that the killer has been following him closely for years now, following every case he's done, including all his promotions and whatnot. He does end up finding the body of the torturer, though, who ended up falling for his own methods. And while trying to scan for evidence, the Bureau finally caught up with Rosa's involvement and revoked her lab access, leaving Thomas on his own. Thomas does end up catching Serial Killer X by surprise by pretending to be the torturer, but right before we can finish him off for good, Thomas is knocked out by Van Horn. It turns out the killer we've been chasing happens to be his nephew, and he's trying to protect him from Thomas, and his nephew gives him thanks by simply choking him out. Thomas wakes up to Leland, the killer's name, about ready to gun him, until Van Horn gets up and decides to knock him out, tells him to find that figure that's been following him, and kill it. Thomas finally fights this figure head to head, which I accidentally got into a stun lock for a good while. I didn't realize it was. He rips off his jaw, drops his body, and lights it up in an explosion below. He meets up with Van Horn again, and finally, after everything he's gone through, he can finally go home and potentially clear his name. But there's one slight issue. Leland is still alive and is in the trunk of the car. Thomas forces Van Horn to pull over. Meanwhile, he begs Thomas to not kill him, saying that it was the figure that was causing him to act this way. You know what? Fine. Let's hear Van Horn out. After all, we're gonna need Leland anyways to clear Thomas's name with the Bureau in. Or, never mind. Oh, where did he get the gun from? Did he not disarm him? Thomas, however, does eventually get his name cleared, and meets up with Rosa one last time. She says that the FBI believes that a cult seemingly is behind the whole incident. Thomas doesn't know anything about this cult to Rosa, knowing that she is wired by the FBI. She leaves, and as for Thomas, well, it seemed like his nightmare has only just begun. And that was Condemned: Criminal Origins. The plot isn't the most amazing thing out there, but it does tell a fairly engaging crime drama and mystery, with plenty of supernatural elements. There's a lot I like about it. I do think the cult aspect comes out of nowhere towards the end, and doesn't really have much build-up as well. But I guess that's what sequels are for. And as for Condemned 2 Bloodshot, I never played that one. It doesn't help either that the game never got a PC release, nor made backwards compatible on Xbox. I can't say anything about 2, but based on the gameplay I saw, it gets pretty insane. Like, you fight a bear in the second game, that's just how insane it gets. Oh well, at least I can compare my scores on the leaderboard. Oh hi, Tats. Condemned: Criminal Origins is great, and I do highly recommend it. I do hope one day that Condemned will come back in some form or fashion, but given how Monolith doesn't even own the IP anymore, and the person who does own it doesn't seem to be the most hinged of people, it's safe to say it's probably for the best it doesn't come back. At least for now, anyways. Well, I've been SonicMan, and I thank you for watching. Have a good day, or night, or whatever, and take care. What? You still here? I know it's the Halloween season, but I'm not gonna jump scare you or anything. Like, why are you still here? You can go now. Bye. Also, Mother Nature can fuck.
Don't have the balls.